God damn. Hopefully this fucking works this time. Otherwise, I am going to blow my lid. Alright, let me give it a sec before I start doing anything, just to check that it's actually gonna fucking work. Okay. It seems good so far. Oops. Tilted. Just a little bit tilted, I am. Still seems good. Okay. I am hella fucking annoyed because 2 days ago, no, it was longer than that. Oh, it was only like 3 or 4 days. Friday, when this game came out, I wanted to stream it. Thursday. I wanted to stream Silksong. I wanted to do it. I was ready to stream it. I had the stream on. I had OBS open. Everything was going well. And then, guess what happens? It would only make sense, nothing other than stupid fucking ping spikes. Explain. Ping spikes. Fucking ping spikes. For what reason? Why am I being rate limited? I think that's the term for it. What is the queuing delay for? Why do we need that? Is my measly little 6 kbps upstream causing that much traffic to the network? Do we have to rate limit me? Is that what it is? It doesn't make any sense, because I go to check. I call Cox Communications in the first place, by the way. Amazing company. I love them. Great. Only option in the area, by the way, because after this whole thing happened, I looked to see if there were other options. AT&T was the only option. Okay, I've heard a lot of bad things. I don't know. I don't have AT&T as a phone provider. I've never used AT&T for internet. I have no idea. I think I know other people that have. I've only heard bad things. Their only plan in my living space is 10 megabits per second down. Cox offers me gigabit per second. I saw online that I was supposed to be getting offered fiber to my building. No. It's it wasn't broadband, it's the other one. Cable, whatever the fuck it's called. And of course, 10 megabits per second down. I get gigabit internet from Cox. And the alternative that you can offer me is 10 megabits per second. Now I get that Cox probably owns the end of the line here. And so the only alternative, or the only thing that AT&T can do is just rent part of it from Cox, I would assume, in order to offer their measly little bit of internet. But they wanted $60 a month for that? Hello? So anyway, hey, still banned? Nope, it looks like I can see you, Kakparo. You're good for now. Don't do anything brash, otherwise you're going to get permabanned again. So I call Cox, and they tell me that the only possible explanation for why my ping is high, because she said that the download speed was also getting throttled. I didn't notice that because I didn't notice any service interruptions. The modem. She said to replace the modem. For ping spikes. And I monitored. I pinged 4.4.4.4 and 1.1.1.1 for a little while, as well as my own router, just to see. There was no ping spike on any of it, which also doesn't make any fucking sense to me. Even when I was experiencing the massive ping spikes on Thursday, there's a rate stability, internet stability testing websites. Hold on. Like this. I don't know how good these are, because I know, for example, where the fuck is my mouse? Hello? Oh, there we go. I know, for example, that the Google internet speed test stuff isn't 100% reliable, but there's this shit, right? Hopefully this works. Okay. This shit, right? Which is supposed to test the consistency of your ping. I don't know how reliable this is, because it was telling me that my shit was bad even while it actually ended up being consistent at a certain point. It looks like this is probably relatively consistent. On seeing it, because you can do this basically, okay? In case you guys don't know, okay? A little thing that you can do, and you can even do this while you're running this test, okay? you can do ping and -t, and then it just infinitely repeats this. So you can see what this does. It says it sends this packet of 32 bytes, right, to and from 1.1.1.1, 1.1.1.1, yeah, which is Google's DNS server. Now, apparently you're rate limited, so it's not the best reflection of the ping stuff, and I think right now it looks like it stopped. Okay, that's random. Either way, it's supposed to run infinitely, and you can, like, test your ping off of this, right? I wasn't noticing any ping spikes from this. I wasn't noticing any ping spikes from 4.4.4.4, which is Cloudflare's DNS server, and I wasn't noticing any ping spikes to my own router. So the only... I mean, I don't really have an amazing explanation for that, because if this was showing poor ping, my stream was getting dropped because of poor ping. Reasonably, it should have, I assume, be poor ping or high ping to a DNS server, because it's the same thing, right? It's just an outgoing connection, unless there's some sort of priority connection that exists to DNS servers before the request comes back to you and then it gets rerouted to the actual original server. In any of these cases, it's not the router, it's not the modem. That doesn't make any fucking sense, right? The only ways that would make sense is if one... Oh, now I can't close out a CMD. Uh-oh. That's interesting. The only... Yeah, I don't... this might not be that accurate, to be completely honest, but... The only way that it could be the modem, the only reasonable explanation for that, oh, it did close, would be if I'm either noticing complete service interruptions, like I'm getting no internet at all, like up or down, not just high ping, or if this here was like 1,000 ping back to normal for a little bit, 1,000 ping like relatively frequently. I was getting that a little bit, but I'm not even getting it now. So if the modem was broken, then clearly it had stopped to be broken out. So in any case, it seems like I was just getting rate limited. Granted, it's the day that Silksong came out, so I suppose that there's a possibility that literally everybody was trying to stream Silksong at the same time in my immediate area at that end of the line type of thing, or maybe just in the broader area, right? Maybe the traffic upstream was so ridiculously high that they had to throttle everyone. Either way, I'm incredibly fucking annoyed. They had to have been... I'm assuming that there must have been some sort of service outage, even though when I called Cox to see if there was, they said no. Maybe they were doing some sort of construction on some aspect, some sort of infrastructure improvement, hypercopium. Definitely not that. But maybe they had to replace some sort of a cable somewhere or something like that. And maybe that made it so that they had to rate limit everyone. They had to implement some sort of queuing delay to actually be able to get enough... to actually have enough bandwidth going out to service everyone in the first place. Either way, I pay... Well, I don't pay. But like $200 a month is paid to Cox for this. This doesn't happen that often, but to me, it makes absolutely no sense. Granted, if it's not consistent, I guess it's not the biggest deal in the world, but why I don't get it. Just doesn't... There's what would anybody be doing upstream? Any reasonable person? Zoom calls or Zoom calls clogging up the upstream connection? Is that the issue? Is everybody uploading fucking 30 movies at the same time to some... I think it's RTMP, right? Some RTMP fucking file service at exactly fucking... I think I have 50 Mbps up. Like exactly 50 Mbps up. Is that what's happening? Is everybody file sharing Silksong at the same time to some server that just so happens to take... that doesn't throttle you below 50 Mbps? Anyway. I was very tilted about that. Oh, I was very, 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 very tilted about that, if you can't tell. Cacpero, just to explain quickly what I was bitching about, because I don't know if you were here for the first part, my internet stopped working when Silksong came out, and so I couldn't stream it, even though I literally fucking tried to beat Hollow Knight as fast as I could just to play Silksong when it came out, but shit happens. Whatever. By the way, how are you doing? And what are we even talking about? Internet provider scamming us, normal stuff, lol. Oh, okay, so you did ask. I'm chilling, aside from that. But I was very annoyed. I wanted to play Silksong the day that it came out, and that just didn't happen. Anyway. So one thing that I wanted to do when Silksong came out, and I did try a little bit, but I don't know that any of that... Oh, wait, I'm not even recording. That's funny. I don't know that any of that was actually captured on stream successfully, because it was probably recorded, but you know, that doesn't mean that anybody saw it. I don't think I need to answer that. There's a fuck ton of calls now in my area, by the way, to try to go against California's fucking redistricting push or whatever the fuck. I want the redistricting. Give it to me. Give it to me. But yeah, so the thing that I wanted to do, I heard other indie creators crying because $20 Silksong is guilt tripping on the lowering price for the game. Like, man, I'm not paying $40 for an indie game, lol. There is an indie game that I gladly paid $40 for. This one, because this game is fucking amazing. The issue is, honestly, is that this actually, you know what? I'll yap about this for a second first, okay? The issue genuinely is that indie didn't used to mean okay, so nowadays I think to a lot of people, indie is a design style. It's like a genre, right? So it's like, for example, you have fighting games. They're focused around typically like a 2D kind of two characters moving back and forth across the screen. They have moves. There's very particular frame timing, typically relatively complex timing demanding inputs in order to get like a given a thing off for like a combo or like a special move or, you know, whatever the case may be, right? That's a genre. These are all things that you decide to implement into your game in order to give it a kind of specific veneer. A lot of people, I think, nowadays think of indie games as a genre in the sense of like, oh, you put the farming stuff in your game. Oh, you put the platforming stuff in your game. You know, okay. Yada, yada, yada. You put the card battler roguelike stuff in your game and suddenly you have an indie game, right? That's never what indie gaming was about, and that still isn't what indie gaming is about at all. Indie gaming is an approach to gaming. The best thing that you could call it is like a design philosophy, right? So it's essentially, for me, indie is just game made by small studio. I would largely agree with that, but I do think that there's like a little bit more that goes into it, just like a tiny bit more, right? Because you can have a small studio of people with like a fuck ton of funding that can make, like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I know for a fact that there are small, how do I want to say it? Bespoke studios, I guess, that can get like a decent amount of funding and then pump out like a huge game, right? Like, for example, Team Cherry is actually kind of more of an example of that to my mind now, but I'll get to that in a second. Indies are more of a design philosophy thing, right? So it's about small teams, typically maybe one person, maybe a couple more people. I know that there's a lot of conversation now about no indie game is made by one person. There was definitely a point in time where the primary brunt of the work that went into indie games was done by one person. That might not be true anymore. I don't know if that's true of Balatro, right? I have no fucking clue. A lot of people say that it is. I have no idea. Super Meat Boy, and maybe I'm talking out of my ass a little bit, this was an indie darling. This was the indie darling back in the day, right? As far as I'm aware, it's made largely by one person, primarily by one person, Edmund McMillan, right? Maybe that's not 100% true. Maybe there's a couple of other people that support it, and maybe even for Super Meat Boy, there might actually have been a couple of other people that were super involved in the development. I don't know. I'm not super familiar with the credits. I mean, it's credited as Team Meat, so maybe Team Meat is more than just Edmund McMillan. But point being is that these games, small team, typically a relatively small amount of money, and typically it's to fulfill a more specific creative direction that might not be allowed for in traditional AAA gaming. That's not exclusively true. There are definitely indie games, especially nowadays, that are a lot more focused on just kind of delivering something that the team thinks that people will buy, right? Or the developer thinks that people will buy. But at the least, those first two seem to be largely true. Indie games can be fucking anything, right? So, like, for example, like, people talk about, like, oh, Silksong well, let's actually go with Hollow Knight. Like, Hollow Knight, one of the most important indie games of all time. Hollow Knight probably is something that you could genuinely describe as an indie game, right? When it came out in 2017, my understanding, and again, I didn't pay super close attention to the credits, my understanding is that it had 1, 2, 3, somewhere around there, kind of like head developers that were doing most of the stuff, and then there was support staff below them, and not that many, right? I've seen the credits a couple times, I wasn't paying that close attention. That's my understanding of Hollow Knight's kind of release, right? The goal of Hollow Knight was to fulfill a particular creative vision, it seemed like, in the sense that we wanted to, we being Team Cherry, wanted to make a Metroidvania that feels Souls-like, with a very particular world that you uncover using the exploration, or by utilizing the exploration, that are typical in Metroidvanias, right? Silksong, my understanding, is largely the same thing. However, I don't know if Silksong's team was bigger than Hollow Knight's team, but one thing that I do know for fucking sure is that Silksong had a lot more funding. Almost guaranteed they did, right? Because partner Microsoft. My understanding is that I can't find any good like reporting on it seems like. My understanding is that Team Cherry was partnered with Xbox, Microsoft, right? That was part of the reason why they did those exclusive trailers for a little while. That's my understanding. Typically, when that sort of thing happens, you'll either have a company signing on as a publisher or some sort of other investor or something like that, right? So, like in exchange for you showing a trailer at our show because we think that it'll drive more traffic to our show, we'll give you a bit of money or handle some sort of other kind of complicated publishing work, right? Beyond that, Team Cherry. I don't know if this kind of information is public. My guess is that there might be a reporting on it somewhere. Team Cherry, because of the success of Hollow Knight, could probably reach out to literally anyone that they wanted and be like, please give us a bit of money for Silksong, and they probably would have said yes, right? That's a bit of speculation. It's probably relatively well-founded speculation, right? So the point with that is just saying that Silksong seems to be made more by like a bespoke studio now, in the sense that it seems like a relatively small team of people still, but that are given more money in order to realize maybe a more complex vision than what they could have realized initially with Hollow Knight, something that I presume, probably pretty reasonably so, had less funding aside from Kickstarter and stuff like that. Silksong, from what I understand, also had a Kickstarter, but that's, you know, for this sort of game, with the amount of partners that they seem to have attached to it, probably was only an aspect of the funding. When you start looking at other sorts of things, right? So Hollow Knight and Silksong are part of a genre, not indie games, but part of a genre being Metroidvania, right? It has indie here as a tag. That's a different thing. I wouldn't say that tags on Steam are necessarily a genre, but like Metroidvania being like the genre, there's a lot of indie Metroidvanias. Axiom Verge is one of the most classic examples. Yeah. Axiom Verge came out a decent bit before Hollow Knight, a couple years, right? And this game was the indie Metroidvania darling for a little while. What else is there? I know that there's a lot of like more recent Metroidvanias that have come out, but I'm trying to think of like older ones, like around the era. Like Blasphemous 1, I think came out like 2018. 2019. So like close to the era kind of thing. This was another really big Metroidvania darling. Yeah, I don't know that I'm gonna... Ori and the Blind Forest was another really great example, and I think that this obviously is a studio that very directly partnered with Xbox, Microsoft, whatever you want to say. I thought they had another game before Ori, but I could be wrong on that. Point being is that Hollow Knight was part of a relatively well-founded genre in gaming as a whole, especially within indie games at that point, right? There are other indie games that, because of that, because some of the most popular indie games happen to occupy very popular genres, or genres that got popular within the indie game sphere. So for example, like card battling roguelike type games, or just roguelike type games in general, like Slay the Spire, Inscription, Hades, like those types of games. Platformers like Celeste, Actually, for roguelikes as well, Binding of Isaac is another huge one. Farming games like Stardew Valley, like Fields of Mystria, like oh god, I think my time at Sandrock and my time at Portia, do those count? Just because most of the successful indie games occupy those like existing genres, people think that that is what makes an indie game. But then you get stuff like this. This is one of my favorite indie games of all time. It's what I would say, maybe even my game of the year 2021, right? I didn't review this, did I? Okay, no, that's a friend. This game, I don't know how you explain this game from an artistic perspective, like right from the art design perspective. But especially if you like listen to the audio and stuff, like I don't know how to explain this. Product of the internet, product of internet brain rot, product of internet hyperculture. I don't know what the fuck to describe this as, right? To be honest, I don't know if you can explain this shit. LOL. Well, but the thing is that you can't explain it from an artistic perspective, or like, excuse me, from an art design and music design perspective, you can't really explain it. From a game design perspective, you can explain it really simply. It's an immersive sim that's a little bit more sandboxy than the typical immersive sim. That's kind of it. It's an immersive sim. You have levels. There's a bunch of different approaches to levels. There's typically multiple different objectives in like a given level and whatever. It's just that through its art design and through the design of its certain aspects of its mechanics. So like, for example, like, so in Cruelty Squad, you can kick people to death, right? You can kick them and then they explode into a bunch of different giblets. And then though they can drop organs, and then those organs you can sell on a black market to get money for it, right? Almost none of that is that weird on its own from a simple game design perspective, because you can, in like GTA, you can kill people and get money. And then you can use that money to buy like important stuff. I think there's even a stock market in GTA 5. So you can kill somebody, you can get their money, and then you can just invest it in the stock market. What's different and weird here is the general art direction, right? It's organs instead of money, right? And it's a black market organ trade, like that sort of thing. And in all of that, because immersive sims tend to have this kind of aesthetic design of like a darker, grittier, more kind of like fucked up world kind of thing, or like the seedy, like underground type of like whatever the fuck. Cruelty Squad takes that to like its ultra extreme, like stuff that isn't even like remotely realistic in terms of how like dark and ridiculous it is, but it makes a very cohesive and interesting game out of it, right? This is an indie game. Is it an indie game that the average like Celeste player is playing? I don't think so, right? But this is an indie game. Even when you, oh god, what is the name of this fucking, yeah, Nubby's Number Factory. I don't think that most, like this doesn't even have a small amount of reviews either. 10,000, right? I don't know that the average, I don't know that the average like Celeste player, I don't know the average Inscription player, whatever the fuck, is playing or cares about this kind of game. What genre is this? It's like, yeah, there's fucking, to be fair, I don't even know that much about this game. There's crane game mechanics. There's, right, you're throwing balls at numbers. It kind of sort of looks like Breakout, but you're like trying to like lower the numbers of the thing to destroy everything. It's kind of like Dr. Mario, maybe, in the sense that there's this, like this combo meter, Puyo Puyo. Like, I don't know how the fuck to describe this. But this is still definitively an indie game, right? Because it seems like, I don't know, I would assume, probably relatively reasonably, that it's made by one or a small number of people, and it has a relatively limited scope, right? Probably didn't have that much money going into it. This is an indie game, right? This is a bigger indie game, but this is still an indie game. Hylix, another fantastic example. This is like an RPG. An RPG with odd art direction that probably has a strange story. I don't know. I haven't played it. Point being, for all of these is that there's no one genre for indie games. These are all things that, no matter how many people know about them, they are still games made by a relatively limited number of people, typically that has a lower amount of investment, and that is typically uploaded directly to some sort of, platform like Steam in order to get people to play it. When we go backwards to some of the biggest indie games of all time, things that we could consider to be genre-defining indie games, like Super Meat Boy, like The Binding of Isaac. I mean, technically, it'd make more sense to actually pull up the original one. What the fuck? BDSM clicker. Nice. Can't click that on stream. Yeah, this one. Like the original. Stuff like Undertale, right? All of these games, for the period in which they came out, occupied genres, is what we would say typically, that were not commonly occupied. Undertale might best be described as an Earthbound-like, right? Because it's some sort of RPG that is similar to Earthbound specifically, like the Mother series, right? It has its own weird sorts of choice making, its own weird sorts of game design quirks, its own weird approach to general game design. But before Undertale, there wasn't really anything like Undertale. The closest thing that you kind of got was Lisa. But Lisa was a little bit more traditionally like Earthbound, right? It didn't have like decisions about killing somebody and not killing somebody. It didn't have the weird kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like platforming, the like moving the heart around kind of thing to like avoid attacks and stuff like that. It just was a more traditional JRPG. Undertale was its whole own thing. But after Undertale, and even like aesthetically and tonally, Undertale and Lisa are pretty dark. Lisa's a lot darker, Undertale's a lot more lighthearted, but can also just occupy like a lot of stuff, right? Undertale can be dark and weird, but Lisa's very specifically dark and gritty, right? But after Undertale, there's a whole host of games like Undertale, even just tonally and aesthetically. Omori is one of the most fantastic examples. Omori is a fantastic, amazing game that's set apart on its own, repping with the Omori shirt, but Undertale is kind of what set the precedent for it. But before that, there was nothing else like it. Before Super Meat Boy, you didn't have these kinds of... I mean, you didn't really have weird, slidey, fluid, intense, all over the place platformers like this, right? You had some on the internet. You had stuff like I Want to Be the Guy, but Super Meat Boy was the first one to kind of have like a concentrated, like, you pay money for this release. Binding of Isaac, very similar. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know of any games that had this sort of moving around the room, shooting projectiles at people kind of thing in order to, like, you know, whatever, like roguelike kind of thing. I don't know that this existed at all before. That just might be me being stupid, but I don't know of anything that was like this, right? Nowadays, there's 30 trillion games like this. You could argue that to a large extent, Hades, one of the most successful indie games of all time, kind of got its idea from The Binding of Isaac, right? Hades might not have existed without The Binding of Isaac. So my ultimate point with all of this is just that it makes very little sense to me that people try to describe indie games as a specific genre and tend to judge indie games based on their kind of given art style or aesthetic or different things like that. That just makes absolutely no sense to me. Indie games are a design philosophy. To try to kind of lump different games like Celeste and Inscription and Cruelty Squad and oh god, what's this game that I'm thinking of? The Circle. Oh, oops. Actually, you know what? I could search my library. It's probably in here. Circle. Nope. I'll have to look for it later. Point being is just to try to group these sorts of things together, and especially to try to set expectations on what an indie game should be based on whatever limited number of indie games that you've played before makes absolutely no sense. That's not what indie games are. Indie games are just a general design philosophy that allows for a lot of more unique expression than you would get otherwise in games. I mean, Fear and Hunger is another fantastic example of an indie game that has especially popped off more recently that is not... Oh, I really hope that there's nothing... Oh, yeah, that's the dick, actually. Okay. Oh, anyway. Fear and Hunger is a fantastic example of a game that isn't really like anything else. And is incredibly fucked up and strange. It has a lot of RPG-style mechanics, but it's very different. It's nothing like your traditional RPG. And yet, this is easily an indie game, just like anything else is. This has gotten more attention, so it's easier to... there might be more indie game people like Celeste fans and stuff like that might call this an indie game, even though they don't necessarily play it. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that there's a reason why people who super talk about how much they love indie games and how indie games they especially analyze them as like a genre kind of thing, don't play or talk about or think about stuff like Cruelty Squad or Psycho Patrol are. To me, that's not an accident. So, yeah, because the original comment that kind of spurred this whole thing, I heard other indie creators crying because $20 Silksong is guilt-tripping them into lowering the price of the game. Like, man, I'm not paying $40 for an indie game. That's exactly the point. Should an indie game cost $40? Should an indie game cost $20? Like should a fighting game, should Street Fighter 5 or should Street Fighter 6 cost $60 or $70? Sure, why not? Right? It occupies that AAA space, and we kind of expect that a lot of fighting games are kind of gotta be up there in price. Tekken 8, should that be $60, $70? Well, Street Fighter 6 is $60, $70. Sure, why not? Those kinds of expectations make sense. Does it then make sense to say that every single AAA or every single game from a studio has to cost $60? Of course not, right? It should absolutely be the case that a studio can publish like a smaller game for less money, right? Like if we look up Katamari Damacy, this is from Bandai Namco, huge studio. I guess it's a more specific developer within that team, but or within that studio. But this is like $30. Should it have to be priced $60? Of course not. Nobody would say that. However, then you get fucking weirdos that will start saying like, oh, well, Silksong is only $20. Now I can't charge $40 for my dog shit fucking farming game clone that's exactly like Stardew Valley with like absolutely nothing else interesting in it. That doesn't make any sense, right? No hate to any specific farming game or whatever the fuck, but it just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. All I can add into this conversation is that I have a weird taste in games. I hate AAA games. Like, I don't know why they just feel too big for me. Maybe besides Driver San Francisco and Rockstar games, like I rather play Broforce, Turmoil, Super Meat Boy, Clone Drone games. Like the AAA games are just, I don't know, not for me. I can't just go into them as deeply as with an indie game or maybe AA game. Also, I love how people call GTA 6 quintuple A. Like, man, are we screaming at this point? LOL. Yeah, the whole conversation around GTA 6 is just fucking stupid. Like, of course, GTA 6 is probably going to be the most expensive game ever made, and it's probably going to be the game that makes the most amount of money of any game ever. But AAA in the first place, like, has an actual meaning, but it also kind of is just like a marketing term. To me, I think that it makes a little bit more sense to say a game from a studio, because you can have plenty of, like I showed, AA games like Katamari Damacy, but also games like okay, if I look at this, does it come up? Okay. Yeah, like this series. Yeah, so you want those games, right? Here you go. Now let's see you clear them. This is published by D3, which publishes not necessarily small games. Earth Defense Force, that sort of thing. Also, again, Monkeycraft, not small developer, because as we saw, they make Katamari Damacy, right? Which everybody knows about to some extent. These are things that we would probably consider AA. I guess maybe those games you could consider more like a single A type of thing. But Bandai Namco is a huge shit. They publish fucking Elden Ring, right? So AAA is very much like a marketing term, I think. Well, I shouldn't say very much. It does reflect a specific thing that happens within the kind of game design sphere, but it is sort of generally a It tends to work as a marketing term, just in the sense that it's like, oh, big game, lots of money pumped in, you expect a certain length. It typically, even more than indie games, will follow like a specific genre format. But to me, I personally like every single type of game ever. Like, there are games that I dislike and there are games that I do like, and they occupy all sorts of everything. I've played a fuck ton of Call of Duty before, right? I've played a lot of Battlefield, even more recently than Call of Duty. I love Elden Ring, right? That is a game that you could probably somewhat accurately describe as quadruple A, right? If there's actually a quadruple A video game, Elden Ring is probably one of them, right? I enjoy a whole load of everything. To me, I don't really like indie games specifically, and I think that this is another aspect of that whole thing that I'm talking about. I don't really like indie games specifically because I think that people set this expectation of like, oh, indie games are more freeing. They can explore different game design ideas like a lot more. You would think that that's true, but a lot of people who make indie games kind of make weaker, more boring games, specifically to appeal to a more particular audience. They aren't necessarily trying to convey something super specifically artistically, right? They don't have this They might have an artistic vision in their head, but not every single decision necessarily goes towards that. A lot of indie games are kind of just, they include a lot of aspects that they think will just like appeal to like a random like average person or whatever the fuck, right? Or they end up not necessarily being as all-around cohesive as they otherwise could have been. A complaint that I actually had about Hollow Knight. I don't think that Hollow Knight is the most cohesive game ever, and I think that there are other games that would have been described as AAA at the time that they came out, like Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night. Maybe Symphony of the Night slightly more AA, but those games I would say are significantly more cohesive than Hollow Knight. That's how I see price of a game in my currency. A game is 0 to 10 PLN. I want minimum 2 to 4 hours gameplay, 20 to 30 PLN. I want around 4 to 8 hours. If we go into 30 to 8 PLN, I want 10 hours minimum. If the game is 80 to 150 PLN, I want 20 to 30 hours and so on. But if the game can be replayable, again, example, clone drone games, I don't care if the story is like 2 hours, if there's endless mode and shit lol. Like, I look at the price of a game and the most important thing for me is how much I get out of it. Yeah, I agree with the last statement about how much I get out of it. I definitely am not someone that agrees with the playtime argument. I'm curious, how much is 150 PLN in USD? So $41. So if we say, I don't know if the pricing necessarily matches up in somewhere like Poland, but typically I guess just remember games are a little bit cheaper here. Yeah, so that's the thing. I don't know. So typically 60 to 70 USD is what we would expect for a AAA game nowadays. So that would be, it looks like 216 to 250 zloty. I don't know if that's actually what the prices of those games would be in that region. But yeah, to me, because like if I just using that perspective, right? So like I'm technically paying more, you know, there's a whole conversation about how much more money I might have living in the country that I'm in or whatever the fuck. But I'm essentially, from like a direct currency exchange perspective, I'm paying more for like a given like whatever set of games. However, if I talk about something like Silent Hill 2, I haven't actually gotten that far in this game. I do not think that my playtime is 15 hours. I don't know where the fuck that comes from. I did not get that far in this game. Maybe I was like idling on it or something accidentally. Either way, I would only expect like 10, 15 hours out of this game. I mean, fuck, I think the original Silent Hill 2 cost probably like $50 to $60 back on the PS2. I don't actually know what it launched at, but probably somewhere around there. I beat that game my first try. Granted, I didn't buy it for that much. In fact, you'd have to buy it for even more now if you want a PS2 copy. But I did get it for cheaper than that. I beat that game in like 8 hours on my first playthrough, I think, and that is easily one of the best experiences that I've ever had with a video game, period. I would have spent $100 on the original Silent Hill 2 and been happy. Okay, maybe not that much, but like $70 I would have spent on the original Silent Hill 2 and been happy easily, right? On the other hand, I also have like 300 hours basically in Elden Ring, and I also love this game. So, you know, to me, I don't think that to me the playtime argument doesn't make sense, because another game, for example, you can get a fuck ton of hours out of a Far Cry game, especially if you 100% it. There's a lot of fucking content. I mean, fucking, I played and made a video on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? There's like 200 hours worth of content in that game. I actually did play probably close to 120, 150 hours in that game. It doesn't make it good, right? I did not like that game very much, and I made a whole very lengthy video on why I didn't like that game very much. To me, there's kind of two big factors that I care about when I am buying a game or playing a game. I buy a lot of games in general, so I'm not necessarily the best point of reference with that. But at least for playing games, there are two big things that I look for. One is artistic cohesion, right? So did the developer do everything that they needed to in order to make the most, in order to convey the message or the artistic vision that they had in their mind the best, right? So are there weird... So for example, in Hollow Knight, I felt like the world was incredible. The way that the exploration works in terms of finding that world is also really good, not necessarily as good as other games in the genre, but the combat was kind of lacking. It was relatively basic, especially for how punishing or for how in-depth it seemed like it was going to be. And especially for how in-depth the other elements are. I would say that as a result, the game is a little bit artistically limited in terms of conveying its whole message, the whole thing that it wants to convey, right? Would I still spend even $30 on Hollow Knight? Probably, yeah. 25, $30, absolutely. But I do think that the game is artistically limited in that perspective. That's one thing. The other thing for me is it the type of thing that I want to play? In general, I have a whole bunch of genres, a whole bunch of approaches to games that I do enjoy playing. So again, I'm not necessarily the best person for that, but because there's a whole load of things that are going to fulfill that thing. I mean, Far Cry is a thing that I want to play, right? But that's not necessarily the same as Silksong or necessarily the same as Cruelty Squad. But for example, for you, Kakparo, for anybody else, you might enjoy an open world game more. You might enjoy a platformer game more. You might enjoy like a grand strategy game more, like Hearts of Iron. I know that you said that you play, right? That's going to be another huge like factor in that. So combining those two things, it kind of is like essentially like I might be looking for a platformer that conveys everything that it wants to artistically from a game design perspective, right? So is it challenging? Is the art direction good? Is the story good? Like all of these sorts of things, whatever story that the platformer ends up having, right? Even if it's limited. That combination of things kind of confirms the personal quality of a game to me, right? So how much am I going to like this game? How much is it going to sit with me? But yeah, that's kind of that part. To me, I think that the thing that stands out the most is just quality of a game. So for me, one thing to me is not so much am I going to buy the game, but am I going to recommend it to other people? Is it something that's going to sit with me? And so to me, artistic cohesion is kind of the biggest factor in that. But yeah. Yeah, something like that. RDR2 is around 250, I'll just say zloty. But if you want ultimate version that adds, I think, 2 missions, it's 430 zloty, and the minimal pay here is 3.5k. Oh wait, you're using 2 different. Is zloty the same thing as PLN? I have no idea. The minimal pay here is 3.5k PLN after taxes, and most people earn, it's the same thing, okay. Most people earn around that, so like you can see the problem here with how expensive is a game versus how much you can make. Also, you need food and other shit, so you can't spend it all on games. Fair. Yeah, I guess. I mean, that makes sense. I don't know. Yeah. Well, like, again, there's nothing wrong with time spent in a game being the main factor for you, and maybe it makes more sense if you have like a more limited budget for games in the first place to have the amount of time matter. I still think that to me I think that even in that case to me it'd still be artistic cohesion, but I definitely see the argument. I just think that to my mind, if I were to apply that, like to do it myself, I think that there would be limitations to it that would make it so that I would miss a ton of games that I would otherwise enjoy a lot. Yeah, Undertale also is not a game that's very long. Granted, I think it's still only $15, but it's not a game that's very long. And yet that's a game that's stuck with me almost more than like most other games in general. But yeah, how much is, let's just say 3,500, 3,500 PLN to USD. That's 2,500, 3,500. So it's right about $1,000 a month. I mean, TBH, I say that, but then I bitch about how games are too big. Lol, it's the Stockholm Syndrome. Yeah, I agree. I think one of the few games that actually hits the perfect kind of balance with that sort of thing is Elden Ring, but I think, what's the poverty line USA? So that is below like the US poverty line. I don't know what the cost of living is in Poland though, because I don't know what the poverty level is there, but I mean, it does make sense in terms of buying. Like one thing that I like to think about with this sort of stuff is that, to me, video games are like an American product. They're typically made by American companies or by other companies in other countries that are typically targeting release primarily at America. And then from there, or other kind of like, I guess, primarily like super first world, like hyper wealthy countries like America, France, Germany, the UK, Japan, that sort of stuff. And then pricing and marketing kind of just goes downstream from there to other countries. So I can definitely see it being a little bit complicated in the sense that like a game, even if it's cheaper, it might still be like fairly expensive in a given region, to the extent where like buying it seems... I'm gonna kill myself. Hopefully this doesn't persist. This is the issue that I was talking about. It's not just your stream that's lagging. Oh, yep, I'm not even live on the other things anymore. I think I'm live on YouTube. Well, if you can hear me, Cacpero, type something just so that I know. But I don't think that I'm live on Twitch right now. Yep. Wait, am I back? Hello? Okay. This is the exact thing that I was talking about, in that it wasn't just Twitch, it wasn't just you or whatever the fuck. That was my internet completely dropping out for some period of time. Again, I'm assuming because of ping spikes. It seems to be the only reasonable explanation. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. If it does, I can't say anything violent on stream. I'm not going to be happy, is my point. Skill issue. I can't say mean things on Twitch. But so it's going to be a skill issue when I 360 no scope a bullet between your ass cheeks in a video game. I think I can say that. So, greatly depends on where you live. LOL. Also, we buy houses that last for generations, not rent houses and moving a lot, or whatever you guys do in USA. LOL. So, you're rage baiting me. And I don't appreciate that, because this is one of the most retarded topics that people talk about at all in America. The houses that last for generations thing only makes sense if you actually have like multiple families, or like not multiple families, multiple people in a family living in that house, or if there's a relatively low population in a given area. I'm assuming that one of those two things is true. For you guys, we have this really, 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 really stupid idea in America that you need to own a house in order to raise your kids in. Sure, okay, fine, right? 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, maybe, that sort of thing. Fine. But then the kids move out, and then you're just like 2 people living in a 3 or 4 bedroom house for the rest of your life. Like, I guess if you can have afforded it, sure, but why? And then we also have this really, really, really stupid idea in America where zoning laws are determined entirely by local municipalities and things like HOAs, which basically are like local district level government type stuff that has a lot of local homeowners, especially in the area, that decides what can and can't be built within a given area. So of course they largely decide towards in the direction of things that benefit the value of their home over time. And then there's also the fact that they typically block things like apartment buildings and other kinds of multifamily housing units being built, because it lowers the cost of living there, something like that. Like, it would lower the property value of their home, even though it can typically be in a highly, highly, highly in-demand metropolitan area like Los Angeles. I think New York is a little bit different, but like Los Angeles, like San Francisco, like San Diego, those sorts of things, especially. California is